All right, so we got to the bottom of 202. In Reuben, it says, Vayishma Reuben Vayetzileh Miyadam. It's the last pasuk on 202. According to remember we said in the previous book there was a heavenly voice that said, well, let's see whose plan is going to come out. And according to some of the Parsha, only Reuben heard the heavenly voice. So when he heard the heavenly voice, he took that as a sign that he's supposed to do something about this. So Reuben suggests throwing him into the pit on page 204. And then the Torah said, this is where we got to yesterday, Pasuk 24. It's on page 204, 5 lines from the top. They took him and threw him into the pit. The pit was empty. There's no water in the pit. But Rashi says brings down the Gemara that there were snakes and scorpions. Water is always symbolic of Torah. And the snake certainly is always symbolic of what? That's the Satan. It's a bor rake. If a person is a person, it's an allusion to the idea if a person is empty from Torah. Ein bo mayim. You got no Torah. Bor rake. You have no Torah in you. Then you're going to have a lot of Yetzer Hara in you. Because the Gemara says, Barasi Yetzer Hara, Barasi lo Torah tavlin. I created the Yetzer Hara, and I created the Torah as the antidote. That means the only counterforce that we have to the Yetzer Hara is Torah. Every mitzvah that you do is important. All mitzvahs are important to do the mitzvahs, but no mitzvah blocks off. No mitzvah serves as the antibiotic for the Yetzer Hara. Only Torah. Especially for men, where men have a very strong, powerful drives. The only thing that weakens that drive, those drives, any drives, is Torah learning. The more Torah a person learns, the more he weakens the drives. And therefore, Torah is there's no water there. So then the brothers go back to eat bread. And they go back to eat bread. According to some of the Mepharshim, they feel, well, maybe if we eat the bread, we'll be in a better mood and maybe we'll view things a little differently. When you're hungry in life, they always say, I think there are certain times when you're supposed to speak to the boss about getting a raise. They always speak to the boss. I think you go before 11 o'clock in the morning or 12 o'clock. After 12, between 12 and 1, the boss is hungry. It's not a good time to talk to him. Right after lunch, that's why there's a concept, by the way, there's a concept of you wine and dine somebody when you're trying to sell a product. Isn't that true? When you're trying, there's something called wining and dining the client, because when people eat, they're in a better mood. That's the concept. That's one of the reasons why we always eat when we're celebrating something spiritual. But we eat. We eat on Shabbos. Shabbos is a day of ruchnius, right? But we eat because we know that a human being, it changes your mood. When there's good food around and there's drink, it changes your mood. We're human beings. But what we try to do is we try to elevate ourselves through the eating of the food without losing focus on the fact that we're human. We put ourselves into a better mood. Then you could sing some Zmiros and you could say Dvar Torah and you could feel that you're the connection. We're not. And we know that when you're fasting, you're irritable. A person who's hungry is irritable. That's a fact. That's why when kids are cranky in the house, or kids are acting up, the first thing you do is you find out is the kid, is he hungry? Is he tired? Does he feel well? Physically, because we respond very much to physical stimuli. So now they take Yosef, we spoke about Yosef being sold, and then take a look. This is a very powerful concept. 2 lines from the bottom. Vayeishev Reuben el abor. Reuben returns to the pit. They've already sold the brother off. V'hine ein Yosef abor. Yosef's not in the pit. Vayikra es begodov. He rends his garments. Now, Jake, I think you were asking me, well, where was Reuben? Well, all this was going on. What do you mean Reuben returned? His whole idea was to put him in the pit and then eventually get him out of the pit and bring him back home. So he returns to the pit. But where was Reuben? Take a look at Rashi. Where is it? Vayeishev, it's the last line on the page. Left column, bottom line, left column. Vayeishev Reuben. He wasn't there at the time of the sale. Why? Shehigia Yomo, next page, Leilechu l'shamesh es aviv. It was his day to go and tend to his father. That means they had a rotation. They had a rotation on and somebody's got to take care of Yaakov Avinu. Somebody's going to be the guy, the son on rotation. It was Reuven's day for rotation. How providential. Davar acher. There's another opinion. Osuk haya, page 206. Osuk haya bisako uvitaniso. He was busy with his sackcloth and his fasting. He was doing tshuva al shabilbel yitzue aviv, because he had gotten involved with Yaakov Avinu's bed. When Rachel died, Yaakov moved his bed into Bilhah's tent, and Reuven moved it into his mother's tent. He said, "Listen, it's one thing it's one thing if Rachel, when she was alive, she was the primary wife. But now that Rachel's died, my mother should take over, not Bilhah, who's one of the maidservants, not Rachel's maidservant." So he got involved in that, and he was criticized, and now he's doing tshuva. How providential. Isn't that interesting? You know how long ago that event took place? You know how long ago that event was? That was 10 years earlier. All of a sudden now, Reuven's doing tshuva for that? Now all of a sudden he's in sackcloth and fasting? So you could say, well, yeah, he was always, for 10 years he was in sackcloth and fasting. Doesn't sound like it. I heard an unbelievable insight here. It's astonishing, absolutely astonishing. Rav Daniel Lehrfield, the Rosh Yeshiva of Beis Yisrael, he said like this: Reuven did his Avera. Okay. Yaakov felt things should be a certain way. And Reuven said, well, I got an opinion too. Right? Your opinion is the bed should be over here. My opinion is the bed should be over here. Now, one second. Yaakov Avinu he's the leader of the family. He's the Gadol Ador. He's the leader of the generation. I understand. You have a problem, go ask him. Why don't you ask him? Why are you taking action on your own? There's somebody who may be older and wiser than you. Okay. So Reuven, he did it. Now all of a sudden you got the brothers who are looking to sell Yosef. Why, if the brothers are looking to sell Yosef, where do they get the nerve to go and do it on their own and not go confirm? Why don't you speak to Yaakov? Why don't you confirm your decision with Yaakov Avinu? Where do you come off going up against Yaakov Avinu? Good question, isn't it? The Reuven understands the answer is. He understands the answer is there's a case precedent. I'm the one who set a case precedent that you don't have to consult with Yaakov Avinu, because I did it with the beds. Oh, the brothers are now ready to sell Yosef. Why are they ready? So why don't you ask Yaakov? Well, Reuven is the oldest brother, and he set a case precedent for us. When you got an opinion, you also have an opinion. This is our opinion. We don't have to consult with Yaakov Avinu. Now Reuven understands the ramifications of something that he did 10 years earlier. Now he's got to do tshuva. In other words, you could do an Avera. Imagine a guy eats pork. Then 10 years later, your neighbor down the block has a kid who's eating pork, kid from a frum family. And the father says to him, why are you eating pork? Because I saw Goldstein 10 years ago. He was eating pork. That's why I decided, and I got to do tshuva again. That means that there are ramifications to your actions. There are what we call the ripple effect. It works in the mitzvahs. When you've influenced somebody, you share in their reward. But it also works in the negative. Reuven is saying, hey, now you know why this is it. Why is Yosef being kidnapped and sold? Because of me. That's why he's being kidnapped and sold. I got to do tshuva for that. It's a frightening thought. It's a frightening thought. And it applies in many other areas of life, both positive and negative, by the way. Both positive, I can tell you dozens of stories of people who has been an influence where you had no idea there was going to be such an influence. And then you find out what the influence is. Did I tell you a story? This lady we had in Ohr Somayach. Have you ever been to Telstone? You know where Telstone is? Telstone's this little town outside of Yerushalayim. My brother lives there. He's the mayor. Hey, just kidding. He's the Don. He lives in Tulsa. It's a nice little frum neighborhood, 100% frum. Nice little thing. It's about 20 minutes outside Yerushalayim, between Yerushalayim and Bnei Brak. Okay. Ohr Somayach years ago, I once gave a talk to some ladies, older ladies. So this lady comes over. She looks like somewhere between 60 and 70, maybe 75. She comes over. She says her home used to be open all the time. She used to have guests all the time, friends, Balei Tshuvas, potential, a friend of a friend. They always had big Shabbos. She made big Shabbos. So one day this lady decides that she is going to go into retirement. They're going to pass the torch. She's going to have a quiet Shabbos with her husband, and she's sitting on the couch Thursday night reading a magazine. She hasn't done that in years. Thursday night she's usually cooking and baking, and she's reading a magazine. And all of a sudden the phone rings. Now, who is it? One of my colleagues here from Ohr Somayach at the time. He's no longer here, Rabbi Shalom Myers. So he was involved in the Mechina program, but he was setting up. He lived in Telstone. The Beis Medrash guys, they're very frum. The Beis Medrash guys were having a Shabbaton in Telstone. So he calls up this lady, and he wants to know, she lives in Telstone, could she have a couple of Beis Medrash guys for Shabbos? So she's like, okay, I'll go into retirement next week. I'll start my early retirement. Next week, I'll have a shower. Okay, one more. She puts on the magazine, starts cooking and baking. Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the knock on the door. Rabbi Myers shows up with the two Bachrim from the Beis Medrash, black hats, jackets, the stones are in their rocks in their hands, ready for Shabbos. They fully equipped for Shabbos. They show up at the door, and one of the Bachrim looks at the house and says, this is the house, this is the house. So Rabbi Myers says to him, what's up? He says, this is the house. The guy was so excited he couldn't. This is the house. He says, what are you talking about? He said, I came to Israel 2.5 years ago. I was completely secular. The yeshiva, the Mechina program, took us on a Shabbaton to some little town outside Yerushalayim and set me up for a Friday meal. I never knew the name of the town. I never knew the name of the people. But I was sitting at their Shabbos table. It was the most beautiful experience I ever had in my life. I decided right then and there I'm going to be frum and I'm going to stay in yeshiva. This was the house. This was the house. I remember this is the house. I was so excited. This is the house. The lady told me she put her plans for retirement. She set them aside. You don't know what effect you're going to have. And sometimes it happens, women, you make a Shabbos, you have a Shabbos and maybe the food wasn't so great, the singing was a little light, the conversation was stilted, and all you're left with is a sink full of crusty chalk pots on Motzei Shabbos, and you think to yourself, what was it all worth? Then you find out 3 years later that it was worth an entire family and generations that are credited to you. That's what but it goes the other way too. Reuben sees now the ramifications of his actions from 10 years ago. Frightening thought. Okay. So then they take, and then look on the top of page 206. So Reuven is upset, and he doesn't know, how am I going to go back to Yaakov Avinu? I'm going to be blind. What do the brothers do in the meantime? Vayikhu es kesones Yosef. They take Yosef's garment. Vayishchatu seir izim. They shech the goat. Vayitbelu es kutones badam. And they dip the cloak in blood. That's interesting. They took a goat's blood. They took goat's blood. So the Rashi says the blood of a goat is similar to a human blood. To make you always got to look as similar as possible. They didn't have DNA testing in those days. It's similar to human blood. Okay. There's another reason why they took a goat. Pesach. What's that? Pesach. We could use a goat for the Korban Pesach. What else? There's another reason why you would take a goat under these circumstances.
The blood looks most closest to human blood.
That's what Rashi says. Or another reason they have a right. What happens if he blows their cover? What if Yaakov figures it out? Yeah, go ahead, Moshe.
Yaakov stole the blessing with
I would go there. There you go. Very good. In other words, what's Yaakov going to say? Hey, guys, what? Oh, come on. Deception? Dad, we kind of learned from you. Well, what did you deceive with? You deceived with goat skins. Right? So, but it was a mitzvah. Yeah, well, they might have a mitzvah here too. In other words, sometimes the best defense is a good offense. And in case somebody blows the cover, and yet you always have a goat skin, a goat. Yaakov, as a matter of fact, it says after he got married and it turned out it was Leah, and you know what the Medrash says? The Medrash says that he said to Leah, well, you deceived me. She said, I learned from the best. I learned from the best. You also deceived, but as a mitzvah, this is a mitzvah too. You understand, there's a deception. Okay, Leah had a deeper idea. At the end of the day, the goats is almost a protection. Now, they send the cloak to Yaakov Avinu, and look at Yaakov's reaction. Vayishlechu es kson, vayishalchu es kson sapaz v'vi'u al aviyam, v'yomer zos matzanu hakir na'aksonas bin chayim lo. Check, is this your son's garment? Vayakira vayomer kesonas bi, it is my son's garment. Chaya ra achalasu, Torah Yosef. Yaakov Avinu sees the garment, and he sees that there's blood all over it, And the brothers purposely brought the garment. They didn't tell Yaakov Avinu, oh, we found his body, because then Yaakov said, where's his dead body? Where did you bury it? Take me to the gravesite. So they have to figure out a way that they can't be challenged on this. We don't know where he is. We only found his garment. And we don't. If they say, well, we got there, we don't know where he is, Yaakov said, well, search the world for him. So they have to come up with this argument. Well, we found the garment. You know, it looks like he was chewed up to death. And he was in. Yaakov says, Torah. The double terminology is he was killed and he was eaten. So there's no reason for Yaakov to go searching for him either. Now, obviously, a wild animal got him, and he ate him up. He made a bori priha adam, but he ate him up. So then Yaakov says, Vayikra Yaakov simlosav v'yasem sak b'mosav. Yaakov rends his garment. Vayisabel al beno yomim rabim. Now, I want to show you two things here. First of all, Yaakov he understands that Yosef has been eaten, killed, murdered, his favorite son. What was Esav's reaction when he realized that he lost the bracha? That he was deceived. What did Esav do? Anybody remember? Vayitzak, what did he say? He yelled. Vayitzak Esav, they gave a hippo hurricane holler. And Vayitzak Esav tza'aka gedola, Esav gave a big loud yell. Look at Yaakov Avinu. Vayakira, Yaakov recognizes again 5 lines from the top. What would you think a normal father would do under these circumstances? He would scream out in anguish that what's happened. You know, say, what did he do? Vayomer, he says, Ksonis b'nei chayira chalasu torah Yosef. Doesn't say Vayitzak. Doesn't say Yaakov. He yelled this way, hey, can you hear me? Yosef was killed. This is what you'd expect to happen, which is what an Esav would do. What's Yaakov teaching over here? Vayomer. We never lose control. Jew does not lose control. 7 days of mourning, if a person, not more. You don't over mourn. There's got to be a certain, everything is controlled. Happiness is controlled. We don't go crazy. Don't get drunk with happiness. We celebrate. We dance. We're happy. We don't go berserk. We don't go bonanza. We're in control. We're not being controlled. We're in control. And then Yaakov, it says, Vayisabel abeno yomim rabim. He mourns for many days. The idea of the mourning, the Mefarshim say, the same pain that he felt at the moment of the being informed, for 22 years he felt the intensity of that pain. Normally, when somebody is nifter, the beginning is the most painful. But the Gemara says a dead person, a meis mishtakech min halev. Can we open that window a little bit to get some air? Sorry. Hameis mishtakech min halev. Somebody, the deceased, are forgotten. Now, you didn't forget him. Your grandfather, you still remember your grandfather, right? You didn't forget him. It means that the pain slowly is removed. Person loses a spouse or loses a parent. The person, he didn't forget his parent. The pain is not the same pain. The pain slowly dissipates. But that's only if they were nifter. That's only if they died. Yosef didn't really die. So the pain that Yaakov felt originally thinking he died, that pain remained with him for 22 years because he thought he died. And he was really alive. So there's nothing to cause the pain to dissipate. So Yaakov, and then they try to comfort him. And in the meantime, the Torah says Yosef is sold to Potiphar in Egypt. Now, I'll get to you one second, Jake. I just want to tell you one thought before I forget it. All through Jewish history, there's been this phenomenon called blood libels. Blood libels are the most ridiculous accusation you could possibly. What is the blood libel? Jews kill a Christian child, and they use his blood for the Pesach matzahs. And that's been a persistent blood, those were the blood libels, and they've persisted throughout Jewish history, and it's always been the same accusation for the Pesach matzahs. Now, there are several things here that are completely absurd about blood libels. Number one, Jews don't kill. Jews are not murderers. I've been in prison. I spoke in prison. I've been in prison, but I spoke in prison also. I spoke in a maximum security prison in Israel with murderers, armed robbers, violent criminals, and none of them were frum. There was one frum guy there because I asked him, what are you doing here? He said, I forgot to pay my taxes. Yeah, he forgot to pay his taxes. Okay, well, that happens. So he was but there were no violent criminals. That doesn't mean we're perfect, doesn't mean it never happens, but there are no murderers. Jews are generally not murderers, certainly not Christian children. Not looking to kill Christian children, number one. Number two, Jews have a strong aversion to blood. A Jewish woman checks an egg before you open an egg. If it's got a blood spot, we throw the egg away. That was a character witness for Mendel Bayless in the famous Bayless blood libel in Russia, where they arrested this guy, Mendel Bayless, who looked like he stepped right off the cover of Jewish Accountants magazine. And he's a little guy with round wireframe glasses, about 5'5", weighed 106 pounds, and he was accused of killing a Christian. So they called the maid in court as a character witness, the non-Jewish maid who worked in the Bayless's home. She said she's been in the kitchen with Mrs. Bayless. When she opens an egg and there's a spot of blood, she throws out the entire egg. This shows the aversion we have to blood. Number two, so Jews are not killers. Jews don't eat blood. We have a strong aversion to blood. Women kosher meat. We kosher the meat. You salt the meat to draw out the blood before you eat the meat. We don't eat meat. It's prohibited to eat blood. It's not meat we eat. Blood we don't eat. And we have a very strong aversion to blood. And number three, the Pesach matzahs, of all things. Okay, look at the box of ingredients. I always get a kick when you buy your matzahs. Ingredients: flour, water. That's it. There are no preservatives. There's no salt. There's no sugar. There's no nothing. Flour, water. That's the Pesach matzah. If you tell me, look, they take the blood and they mix it in chalt. Okay, that I could say. Sometimes chalt has a little brownish tint to it. And all sorts of stuff goes in chalt. By the way, when you're married, if you're ever missing your wallet, check the chalt. Right? You never know what got tossed into the chalt. A potato, a carrot, and a wallet. Who knows what's in the chalt? Matzahs, it's absurd. Where, and it's been perpetuated through history, where did they get this idea from? Where did they get the idea to make a blood libel on it, which makes no sense logically? Rabbi Chanan Wasserman Zatzal says, when the brothers deceived Yaakov Avinu with blood, there was unleashed an energy in the Bria, in the world, an energy was unleashed that allows for those blood libels to persevere all those generations. That's what he says. Because it makes no sense on normal. There are other accusations that Jews are embezzling money. Okay, Jews are what do you call? There's a pyramid scheme. Okay, I understand. A blood libel, matzahs, makes zero sense. That's what that energy was unleashed by deceiving Jacob. Yeah, what do you say, Jake?
It mentions all daughters.
What's that?
It mentions all of Jacob's daughters.
Can't hear.
It mentions all of Jacob's daughters.
I'm not
all
understanding.
of Jacob's daughters? I thought he only had one.
I think it's his what do you call it? His daughters-in-law. Daughters-in-law and called daughters also. I think Rashi, who says it? There's somebody saying it. V'chol benosav, he said the brothers had twin sisters that they married, and some say they were his daughters-in-law. The person calls his daughter-in-law his daughters.
Also, does the fact that Yaakov was deceived by his kids have something to do with that Yaakov deceived his father?
Is there a mida keneged mida over here? I have to think what the Medrash says. Possibly. There is a punishment for Yaakov Avinu that when Esav yelled, the Yaakov Avinu got a slight amount of, he heard the yell and had a slight amount of enjoyment that Esav is frustrated. So that he is punished for.
Yeah, but his mother said that she'll take everything.
Right, but that was as far as the father's curse. That wasn't as far as the Esav's yell. Okay, now the Torah goes on to the next section, which I want to go through a little bit. We're going to have to continue with this next week because there's too much in this Parsha. But the Torah talks about Yehuda. Yosef goes down to Mitzrayim. Yehuda is now going to Yehuda is going to come into the picture. And the brothers are upset with Yehuda because this whole thing was his plan. They didn't expect it to work out. Yaakov is in a state of mourning. So Yehuda, who's the leader, the brothers have kind of demoted him. That's how it picks up on 208. Now stay with this. This is remarkable. Because the Medrash says, Yaakov Avinu is in a state of mourning. Yehuda is in a state of mourning. He's going to lose 2 children. Yosef is being sold into slavery. I mean, things look really bad here. Yaakov's mourning, Yehuda's mourning, Yosef's in slavery, and the seeds of Moshiach in the meantime are being planted. While everything looks horrific, what's really happening under the surface? The seeds of Moshiach are being planted. That's what's happening. Let's see. That's what the Torah is going to teach us now. Okay? Vayhi ba'esahi vayered Yehuda ba'esachav. Vayet, now watch this, guys. You have to see this inside. Page 208, top line. Yehuda leaves his brothers. Vayet ad ish adulami ushmo chira. Now, Yehuda turned away towards an Adulamite man. That's how the Arabs turned away. He became a partner with this Adulamite man. And he gets married to this Adulamite man's daughter, and they have two sons, Er and Onan. And then they have a third son named Shelah. And Er marries a woman named Tamar, and he ends up dying because he wastes his seed. He didn't want to mar her beauty because he didn't want to get her pregnant and waste his seed, because if she gets pregnant, she's not going to be as attractive, so he wasted his seed when he cohabited with her. Onan marries her, he's the brother, because the concept of Yibum, there we go, Yibum, existed even before the Torah was given. And in the ancient world, the Ramban says the ancients knew the secret. A man died without children. The best thing for him was that his next relative, even if the relative was his father, even if it wasn't a brother, a relative should marry the wife. And that's why you find in the Ruth story, the story of Ruth, also Boaz marries Ruth. It's not pure Yibum because he's not a brother, but he's a relative. So he marries the deceased relative. That was a known, the Ramban says it was known, the secret was known in the ancient world that that's a good thing for the deceased. Okay. And then this woman Tamar, two brothers have died. Onan wastes his seed also, and he's died. This is the storyline over here. And now there's a third brother, Shelah. And Yehuda tells Tamar, his former daughter-in-law, go home, and we'll wait till Shelah gets older. But Yehuda doesn't really want her to marry Shelah because he thinks that Shelah's going to die also. So he's lost two sons. And one of the reasons he loses these two sons is a punishment. You caused your father the pain of feeling what it's like to lose a son, even though he hasn't. Now you'll see what it's like. And he loses two sons. Okay. Number one. But I want you to go back for a second to that first pasuk at the top of page 208. And you have to look at the words very carefully, gentlemen. Vayihi ba'esahi, vayered Yehuda me'esachav. Yehuda leaves his brothers. Vayet ad ish adulami ushmo chira. Vayet is like, comes from the root of the word vayita. Vayita, he pitches his tent, or you plant. Now, I was bothered here because it says, well, he meets this Adulamite man. I'm very bothered. What's the Adulamite? Like, we're supposed to know who this guy is? The Adulamite. You know, who's the Adulamite? So I was very bothered by this, number one. Number two, this entire section is going to culminate with Yehuda marrying Tamar and having a child called Peretz, and that's where the Davidic line is going to come from. The Davidic line is going to come from this union between Yehuda and his former daughter-in-law. Very, very strange story. So I was bothered, so I looked up the word Adulam. Adulamite means he's from a place called Adulam. And I looked up, where does this appear in the Nach, this word Adulam? And guess what? The first place it talks about is a king, a non-Jewish king of Adulam. That's the first, it's called Melech Adulam. Shows up I think in Shoftim. That's the first time. So talk about a king. The next time you find the word Adulam in the Nach is that Dovid HaMelech, when he was on the run from Shaul, he was hiding in a cave of Adulam. What a coincidence. He pitches his tent, or understood otherwise, Yehuda is planting the seeds. Read the words. Vayet, he plants the seeds, ad ish adulami, that are going to reach the man of Adulam. In other words, he's planting the seeds to reach David HaMelech, who's in the cave of Adulam. So the entire thing alludes to the Davidic Malchus based David, King David HaMelech. Well, 1 second. It's going to get more. Now we're going to have some fun. Look at that word Adulami. See the word Adulami? First word, second line. You got to see it inside. Ayin, what's the numerical value of an ayin? Ayin. Yud is 10. Ayin is 70. Any significance of number 70 by Dovid HaMelech? He lived 70 years. Dalid obviously stands for what? Dovid. Lamed is 30. Dovid was 30 years old when he took the reins. He was 30. He was king for 40 years. And Mem Yud stands for Melech Yisrael. So this entire section is an allusion to we're heading for David HaMelech over here. The whole thing. Now,
Rashi say that? Like, who's pointing that out?
me. So there was just something I noticed. But I just noticed what triggered off what I was curious about more than anything is why this adulami, that bothered me. And so I opened up a concordancia. Do you know what a concordancia is? A concordance, it's a index of all the psukim, all the words that you can find. You can look it up and then see where the pasuk. I mean, you guys, what I call concordancia, you call Google. But it's a big thick book that's got every word and where it appears anywhere in Nach. So I looked up the word Adulam because it's a place. Adulami means it's a place. He's from Adulam. So I looked it up and wow, there's David HaMelech hiding in the cave of Adulam. That's the first thing that I found. So it can't be a coincidence. It can't be a coincidence. The fact that it's got the numbers over there, okay, that's entertainment. But at the end of the day, it's also a curious coincidence, isn't it? Very curious coincidence. Now, Yehuda, in the meantime, puts Tamar on hold. She's the daughter-in-law who's lost 2 husbands. And then he starts going out to shear his flock. Yehuda has this flock. Now here comes one of the, it needs an explanation, let's put it this way. It's what we would call, the English call, it appears like a bit dodgy, right? So we need to understand this. So take a look at Pasuk Yud Gimel, top of page 210. They tell Tamar, your father-in-law is heading out to shear the sheep, which apparently was a very happy day because you're shearing the sheep, you're going to make some money now off the wool, and it was they used to celebrate on the days of the sheep shearing. Everybody's in a good mood. When you catch people in a good mood, when you're in a good mood, you're a little bit more vulnerable than you are when you're in a bad mood. When you're in a good mood, hey, let's go to a restaurant. I'm in a good mood. Nobody goes to a good mood. Nobody goes to a restaurant when the stock market is crashing. When you make some money, where the windfall, all of a sudden, hey, yeah, let's go buy us you're in a good mood. So what does Tamar do? Vatasar bigdei al menusa me'aleh. She removes her widow mourning clothing. Vatechas bat saif. She covers herself with a veil. Vatisalof, she wraps herself up. Vateshev bapesach einayim asher al derech timnosa. She's open. She stands by the crossroads. Ki rasa ki gadal Sheila v'no nitno isha. She saw that Sheila, the third brother, has gotten older, and still Yehuda did not allow her to marry him. So now she's going to take matters into her own hands. So she covers herself up, and she stands at the crossroads. Vayireha Yehuda vayachsavel zona. Yehuda saw, I thought she was a zona, a harlot, kikisa safaneh, because she covered her face. I mean, generally, zonas don't cover their face. Why would, she's dressed all tznius. She must be a zona. The indication is otherwise. And that's why the Gemara says, he thought she was a zona. Why? Because at one point she had covered her face. That means when she was his daughter-in-law, she was so tsanua when she was living in his house that she kept herself covered. He never saw what his daughter-in-law looked like. That's how tznius she was. So now when he sees this lady out there with her face uncovered, she's obviously a harlot. She's not his daughter-in-law. And therefore Yehuda solicits her services. And the Medrash says he was pushed by the Malach. Because Yehuda is a tremendous tzaddik, and tzaddikim don't go around soliciting women on the street. And not only that, the Medrash says that they had a whole conversation. Because before he would live with her, he had to determine that she's not impure, she's not a nida, because he kept the laws of nida. And she told him that she's not, and he said she's already immersed and she's pure. And the Medrash says that the Malach pushed him. It's not an excuse anybody could use nowadays. The Medrash says, these on TV, the devil made me do it. Well, the Malach made me do it. No, it doesn't work. But Yehuda at his level, and remember, guys, what's going to happen from here? What's going to come from this? Moshiach's going to come from here. So it's obviously something beyond what we would normally ascribe to it. Now, let's go back to this point, because this is a very fundamental point in Torah. She was so tsanua as a daughter-in-law that he never even saw her. Interesting. She don't look like she's behaving tsanua right now, standing at a crossroads. So we have a very interesting pattern that emerges in Torah. What was Avraham Avinu, what was he known for, gentlemen? Chesed. Chesed, absolutely correct. He is the man of Chesed. So let's take a look at Avraham Avinu's life. It starts out with him abandoning his elderly father. He gets involved in a world war. He throws his nephew out of the house. He commits an act of self-mutilation on himself and his entire family. He called bris milah. He throws his son out of the house, and he takes a knife to the neck of his second son. He's the man of Chesed, right? He's always either with a knife or throwing people out. He's the man of Chesed, okay? And you got Yitzchak. What's Yitzchak known for? What? A Yitzchak is avoda, din. Yitzchak is din, strict justice. Interesting. His name means laughter. He tolerates the wayward son. He entertains his wife. He backs off, even though he's got the valid claim. He backs away from the Philistines, the Plishtim, when they're fighting over the wells. He gives in. Exactly what you wouldn't expect. Din. Din means the strict, stern principle. Throw the bomb out. Yeah. Everything is the opposite. And what's Yaakov? What's Yaakov's midah?
He's like the learned man of the tent.
He's the learned man of the tent. What's his midah known? Titain emes liyaakov. Yaakov is the ish emes. Titain emes liyaakov, the pasuk says. Yaakov is emes. Well, let's see Yaakov's life. He deceives his brother, deceives his father, deceives his brother, deceives his father-in-law, deceives... Everywhere you touch him, there's a deception. The professional con man. And he's the ish emes. What's going on? And now you get to Tamar, Miss Tznius, right? And there she is standing on a crossroads. And it goes even further. You'll see this everywhere. Moshe Rabbeinu is the most humble man in history. He's the most famous man in history, position of leadership. Right? Pinchas is raised in the house of Aaron, is a grandson of Aaron, the Ohev Shalom, the man of peace. Right? So Pinchas, the grandson of the man of peace. So what does he do? He takes a spear. And he commits the single most violent act of that we find in the Torah by killing Zimri and Cosby at the same time. Rus. How did Boaz notice Rus to begin with? Rus was in the field. She's gathering sheaves with all the poor people. And people are gathering, they're hungry in those days. See, there's wheat, there's grain falling. So people are jumping all over the place, grabbing it. It's like guys in yeshiva when they're schnitzel. People are grabbing away at it. What's she doing? She bends down very dainty with it. And so what the Gemara says, Boaz said, hey, who's that girl over there? The Gemara says, Boaz, the head of the Sanhedrin. Boaz is asking about women? He's looking at women? She was so tsanua. She was eye-catchingly tznius. How's that for an irony? It's like being on a campus of University of Arizona in July and some girls walking across the campus in a dress. That's the one you would notice. Everybody else has clothing allergies. That's the one you would notice. Right? That's the one who stands out. She stood out with her tznius. Then what does she do? She goes down to the granary at midnight alone with Boaz. Not very tznius there. Clearly, what's going on? You see the pattern? The pattern in the Torah is, are you in control of the trait, or the trait is in control of you? If you're a softie, if a guy in the street says, hey brother, can you spare $1? And he's got a rusty needle sticking out of his arm. Can you spare $5? I haven't had a meal in a couple of days. He's got a rusty needle, he wants it for drugs. If you can't say no, you're not an ish chesed. you're just a softy. You're spineless. You have to know how to turn it on and turn it off. If you're an ish chesed, you have to be able to abandon your father because God said so, not say, well, I can't do that to the guy. You have to be able to throw out the negative influence from the home, and not say, well, I can't because it's too angry. That's not an ish chesed. That means you're spineless. You're just a softy. If you can't go against your natural inclination, you're being controlled by it. It's not controlling you. That's why each one is tested exactly the opposite of what their midah is. Yitzchak, let's see how you handle your wife. Let's see how you handle the plishtim in a confrontation. He walks away from it. Din says, boom, right through a fist through the wall. Yitzchak says, no, you got to walk away. Yaakov, you need to deceive now. If you can't deceive when you need to deceive, then you're not a man of truth. You're just a man you got no spine. You have to know you're a man of truth, but right now it requires a deception. Ask any husband whose wife asks him how supper was, even though it wasn't great. And the wife's just so pleased as punch. And when she's not looking, you just go, yeah, that's why I couldn't say anything. How do you like my new sweater? And what you really think it is, the Salvation Army had a clearance. Right? So if you say that, you're not a man of truth. You're just a cruel, insensitive, and going to be somewhat hungry human being. Yeah. Same thing with Tamar. That's the test of Tamar. She was inherently tznius. She was so tznius she never saw him. But now, when it has to be done, because she has some prophetic, some ruach hakodesh that she knows that the messianic line is going to be coming, this is what I got to do. It's the last thing in the world I want to do, but this is what I'm going to do. And that shows that she really deserves to have kings come from her, because it takes a king to rule over himself. And therefore, Tamar is going to be the forerunner of the messianic line. Now what happens? So Yehuda and Tamar, they live together. And then 3 months later, they come to Yehuda, and Yehuda gives her 3 items. She says, okay, I want you to pay me. This is what we're speaking about in Shir today. So take a look at Pasuk Yud Zayin, 7 lines on the top. Vatomer ma titen li ki savo elai. She said, what are you going to pay me? Vayomer anochi ashalach gedi izi minatzon. He says, I'll send you a goat. That's a good payment. Vatomer im teine rovad al shochacha. Yeah, but what do you give me? What do you? I want something up front. I want something up front. How do I know that you're going to do it? Vayomer ma'ir ravan asher eten lach. She said, what would you like as a security? Vatomer chosamcha ufsilecha u'matcha asher biyadecha. I want your signet ring, and I want your garment, some sort of wrap, and I want your staff. Vayiten la, he gives her. Vayavo eleh, they live together. Vatahar lo, she becomes pregnant. And then 3 months later, when a woman is showing, after 3 months, that's when you see a woman is showing, they come and first Yehuda sends the goat. He sends the goat to get his stuff back. He said, hey, where's the harlot? No harlot around here. Okay, they go. What can you do? She's got his stuff. She gets pregnant, and they had a law in those days that immorality from the time of the time of the Mabul, they had put some sort of, since there was a flood because of immorality, so they had passed laws against immorality. So they come back and tell Yehuda, hey, your daughter-in-law is pregnant. And Yehuda says, okay, they have a beis din. He says they sentence her to death for immorality. She has to be burnt. And she's being taken out to be burnt. And she sends these 3 items to Yehuda, and she says, the man who these belong to is the father. Now, you're the head judge of a beis din. You're Yehuda. What would you do? And what would you do under? And Yehuda says, she's right. It's me. That strength of character to admit your flaw in public, that's what qualifies Yehuda to be the king. She names him in a paternity suit, and he says, yeah, it's me. And as a result, he ends up saving Tamar and the 2 children. The 2 children are born, Peretz and Zerach, and Peretz becomes the forerunner of the Davidic line. That's where we're holding right now. Then we're going to go back to Yosef and Mrs. Potiphar on Sunday, Mirza Hashem.